What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Kyle57 YouTube channel. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel. I know it's been about a week and a half since I've posted my last video. I do apologize about that. I've been in the midst of a couple trips here, and I just wanted to make sure that I bring out the best quality content for you guys. And with it, the videos that I made for last week were very, very mediocre, and I only want to give you guys the creme de la creme. So I apologize about that, but we are back for another, you guessed it, Theological Thursday. One thing that a lot of people have been asking me about in my personal studies and just regular conversations with brothers and sisters that I know is the difference between the deital perspective, aka God's perspective, and the human perspective. And quite honestly, there are some people that don't even think of a perspective from God. They only look at our lives and everything in this world, especially even in the lens of the Bible, from the human lens, the human perspective, when there's a whole nother realm of what's going on from the creator of the universe. And so I think it's not only important to acknowledge, but important to understand. So in today's video, we're going to be going in depth to describe the main differences between God's perspective and our perspective, and how they can relate with each other to create harmony in the Word of God. So let's get started. So there are three primary characteristics that describe God's sovereignty, in which characterize the main difference between God's perspective and our perspective, right? Because inherently, what is a perspective? It is one's view of reality relative to their existence within reality. So for a human, for example, we perceive reality because we are inside of time and we are happening concurrently with it. So as we experience it, we don't know the future, we only know the past and experience the present. That's how we experience it. That's our perspective. But from God's perspective, He is sovereign. He is the ultimate creator. And so one would logically think, does He know all aspects of creation? And if so, how does that impact His perspective? And the obvious answer to that question is yes. He is sovereign over everything, and He is the ultimate creator of everything in this universe. If you guys went to R.C. Sproul's commentary on the three primary wills of God, you will remember that there's something called God's decretive will. And of course, this refers to both His active and passive sovereignty, which means that He knows everything that's going on in this universe, whether He is actively creating it or passively allowing it to exist. Nothing in this world can happen without God's quote-unquote seal of approval. So let's break down the three characteristics of God's sovereignty that differs His perspective from ours. The first being omnipotence, which represents God's all-powerfulness. So, because He is the ultimate creator, He has all power over all of His creation. It would not make sense for a creator to create something that ultimately will have more power over Him, right? In that case, you would have a universe that doesn't know who the ultimate authority is, right? And when you don't know who the ultimate authority is, there's no absolute truth. And when there's no absolute truth, well, you live in a world of relativism, in which case I would argue is borderline meaningless. So let's compare God's omnipotence to the power level of a human being from their own perspective. As humans, we control our own lives from our own perspective, and we have relative control in marriage or over our children one day, and we have a relative impact within the family that we have. However, if we were to meet someone random off the street, do we have the authority to say, you shouldn't be doing this, or you can't do this if it's legally binded by the Constitution, but I don't think you should be morally allowed to do it? Do humans have the power to do that? Not necessarily, right? If something is written in law as a absolute truth, right, or a relative truth to the absolute truth, then you have to obey it whether your personal morals agree with it or not. And so there's a disparity of power between humans and God. And so that's one characteristic that differs God's perspective from ours. So the second characteristic that distinguishes God's perspective from the human perspective is his omnipresence, meaning his all-presence-ness. So him being in all places at all times. And of course, this is possible due to the inherent nature of God. Since God is indeed a spiritual being, he is present in all places. Compare that to humans, as we are physical human beings, and we cannot be in all places at once. For example, I right now am sitting here and recording a video for you guys, but I am also not in my kitchen, and I am also not in Beijing, China, right? I'm not in those places at once. However, because God is a spiritual being, he is in all places at all times. I personally believe that omnipresence is the biggest distinguishment between God's perspective and the human perspective, because it describes our being not only in terms of physical versus spiritual, which we've already touched upon, but also inside and outside of time, right? If God is the ultimate creator of the universe, which we would agree if you're a Christian, then you have to admit logically that God created time, and that therefore God pre-existed from time. And so that means that God is completely outside of time. To put that in human layman terms, God was 20 years ago, is right now, and will be 20 years in the future, and infinitely extending in all directions. That is what it means to be outside of time. So this is why, when it comes down to certain biblical arguments, I don't understand how this is happening. I can't comprehend how this is possible. You have to remember that we have a human bias that comes from inside of time. When you put many biblical arguments into the perspective of God, where he is outside of time, you'll often find the answers of how it's possible. Because there's a relationship between us as human beings and God, who is a spiritual being. And with that, of course, comes a relationship between someone who is inside of time versus someone who is outside of time. The third characteristic that differs God's perspective from our perspective is his omniscience, which represents his all-knowingness. So because God is the ultimate creator of the universe, he has to understand and know everything that he has created, right? It doesn't make sense for a creator to create something that he doesn't really know. God isn't just someone who creates things out of accidents, because God is all-powerful and consequently all-knowing. He understands the motives and the true workings, the inner workings of everything that he creates, which is mind-blowing to us as human beings. Even that fact that I can say that it's mind-blowing represents a cap of knowledge that human beings have, whereas God has infinite amount of knowledge. Anything that you may think in this universe about whether it's correct or it's incorrect, anything that exists, God knows. Whereas for us as human beings, we progressively gain intelligence as we exist. And so what that means is our levels of intelligence increase or even decrease for some people as our time in the universe increases. With that, there's a disparity between a God that knows everything and a human being who knows only some things. And that's pretty much it, guys. That's the crux of the difference between God's perspective and our perspective. To sum it up for you, God is omnipotent, meaning all-powerful, omniscient, meaning all-knowing, and omnipresent, meaning all-present, in a bundle in which we would call sovereign. We, as humans, being inside of time, limited knowledge, limit in power, limit in presence. Compare this to a God who is infinitely extending and ultimate in achievement in all three of these characteristics. There's going to be a disparity in perspective of how you see the world. And so ask yourself the question, what biblical topics require a distinguishment between God's perspective and our perspective, right? There's an obvious distinguishment in a relationship between humans and the Lord. So where can we apply these different perspectives in order to help our understanding of the scriptures? If you guys come up with any ideas and anything that you would like clarification on, drop it in the comments below. I'd be more than happy to answer any of your guys' questions that may come about and necessitate the difference of the deital and the human perspective. If you guys like this video and enjoyed this Theological Thursday, please hit the like button. Consider subscribing to the channel. And even if you didn't like it, feel free to hit the dislike button, but your contractual agreement is that you have to let me know why in the comments below. Because I always seek to improve these videos for you guys so that way we can better glorify God in His kingdom. Thank you guys so much for checking in again. It's been your boy, Cowboy57. Peace out.